Hey guys,
Hey, what happened there?
I don't know. I was connected and everything, and I unmuted. You know how you unmute your mic to say I'm back, and Spaces did his thing. Like I was literally about to speak. I had my bars and
That wasn't
everything.
me. I just
So
want to say.
No,
no, it was a glitch. I was literally in my room, ready to start talking, ready to jump in and get this conversation going.
oh,
And Spaces
Edwin,
said,
Edwin was mid-question when that ended and crashed for us.
Yeah, all I did was unmute my mic, literally.
Hmm.
Um, that's literally all I did.
I think it was Edwin's fault.
Yeah. All right, let's get Edwin back up so he can finish his
Yeah,
question
I
that he was
am.
asking.
I am. I'm doing it right now. All I was doing was unmuting my mic, so uh, I didn't even touch up there. But we're back. We're back up. We're back in here. Let me bring him up. I sent him a few invites already. There.
Yeah, I didn't
Hey.
think my question was that hard. It seems harsh to just,
No, what
crash
happened?
the whole
I
thing.
unmuted my mic.
No, it's fine. It's fine.
Yeah, unmuted my mic and it shut down. I don't know what happened because I was literally sitting here unmuting. But go ahead,
Yeah,
Edwin.
so
You can continue with your
yeah,
question.
just to kind of summarize the essence of the question, it was just that um yeah, it was still jarring to me to know all the things about Kobe being difficult and arrogant and tough on teammates as a, young player growing up. And it's another thing to see in detail those scenarios of how he was difficult and how he was a jerk. So my question to you, Jeff, is given the fact that you've interviewed and talked to a lot of superstar high caliber players and heard stories about them, do you think that Kobe had a little bit more of an edge to him when it comes to that, or is this kind of the norm for a Walter Payton, Bo Jackson, Magic Johnson type of player?
So it's interesting. I'm going through my head the different people I've written about, and like when Bo Jackson was first signed by the Royals, he showed up. He came before he was sent down to minor leagues. He played in Memphis in Double A for a while, and before he went to the minors, he came to Kansas City to hang out with the team for a few days, and he handed out in the major league clubhouse autographed photos of himself accepting the Heisman Trophy and was handing them out to all the members of the Royals. And that went over very, very badly, like very badly. When Aaron Rodgers was a rookie with the Packers, the first time he met Brett Favre, he said, "Hey, Grandpa," and that went over very badly. When Walter Payton was a rookie in training camp with the Bears, he wore bells on his shoelaces. So every time he would run, you'd hear jingle, 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 jingle. That did not go over well either. So there definitely have been past examples of really cocky rookies. Lenny Dykstra with the Mets, when he was first caught up with the Mets, was super cocky. But I think Kobe took it a different level. He just had like a lot of those guys were covering up for insecurity to a certain degree. Sometimes you overcompensate because you're young and dumb. And I think Kobe actually arrived in Los Angeles for his first training camp and thought he was the best player on the Lakers from the beginning. And this was a team with Shaq, Nick Van Exel, Eddie Jones, a whole bunch of really good players. And I just think from the beginning, he truly believed he was the best player, probably in the NBA. And that's very unusual.
The one thing, reading this book, and again, thank you, Jeff, for being here, and really appreciate you for speaking with us.
Mhm.
The one thing reading this book that I walked away with was Kobe was a baby. You know what I mean? In the league, a baby who didn't want to be intimidated. I mean, he was. I mean, he didn't want to be intimidated by the veterans. And we have to remember the time frame of when young, of players coming in '96. That was when, a year or two after Kevin Garnett came in. And you really, young players like that really were not embraced by the veterans like that. So I'm thinking about, you have Kobe, and then you have the Shaq and Kobe combustion, where they coexisted and they won 3 chips together, but the relationship was tumultuous at best. They even almost came to blows a few times. So when you're looking at how this team, with Shaq and Kobe as the leaders, as tumultuous as Kobe's relationship was with teammates, um, what credit do you give to that team to really go through a three-peat in the midst of everything, all the relationships that were going on at the time?
I mean, I think the one thing you learn from that whole experience is that ultimately 95% of the time, the most important thing is talent. And, you had these two superstars who did not get along at all, who had real trouble with each other and real personality conflicts. But the Lakers were better than everyone else. They had two of the five best players on their team, and then they surrounded them with amazing role players. And then you had a coach, Phil Jackson, who was smart enough to kind of let players work it out. He wasn't really a babysitter, he let them work it out. And he was okay with conflict if it didn't get in the way of winning. So I'm not saying, like, I don't know if anyone deserves amazing credit except for the fact they were just better than everyone else. Like, they were a better team than Portland. They were better than Seattle. They were better than Phoenix. Like, they were better. And at the end of the day, especially people forget, I do think people forget how good Shaq was. Everyone talks Kobe, Kobe, Kobe. I mean, Shaq was the most dominant force in sports at that point. He was pretty unguardable. You'd have to double team him. A lot of the perimeter players were left open. You'd have guys doubling down every time the Lakers had the ball. Um, they were really hard to beat. So ultimately, yeah, they didn't get along well, but they were better than you and me and every other team in the league.
One thing about Phil that I think he doesn't get enough credit for, because a lot of times people say the same thing, right? Oh, he's got a lot of rings, but look at all the talent he had every single time. It's why he's so successful. And while obviously that's a huge factor because talent plays, not coaches. I think his biggest talent is being able to manage those kinds of egos and people. One of the early, I think it was maybe even the very kind of early story you gave about Kobe and in a conflict. I forgot what player, where they were being challenging Kobe to a fight, and then Phil agrees to pull the bus over so they can settle it. And the fact that obviously in your book you say that nothing happens, and Kobe actually bows down and doesn't actually get into a boxing match on the side of the road. I was really surprised by that because it felt like Phil knew exactly how to push and thought of the consequences and was able to kind of toe that line while still giving them the freedom to do that. Because that sounds like a crazy story that a coach would say, you know what, yeah, let's pull the bus over and let fight with our young athlete. What do you think about Phil's ability to kind of balance those things and kind of how on edge they were at times, given the situation with the personalities in play?
Well, that was Samaki Walker, a forward with the Lakers. And he, I mean, the thing is, like, if you look at the great coaches in sports, they're just not babysitters. Vince Lombardi, if you look at Greg Popovich, if you look at Bill Belichick, if you look at Casey Stengel, I mean, go across the board any sport you want. Glenn Sather in hockey, they're not babysitters. You don't win as a babysitter. You just don't. Players hate babysitter coaches. And they may be needed for a little while, but they always wear out their welcome. And Phil wasn't a babysitter. So he won more respect by saying, all right, if you two idiots want to fight, let's pull over the bus. Okay, let's do it. And having Kobe back down did something with the team. And it would be far better for Kobe Bryant than to have like the last thing Phil Jackson needed and Kobe needed was players thinking that he had this protector in the head coach. Like, basically what he was saying is, and this is the thing Dale Harris said to him early on when Dale Harris was a coach of the Lakers. It's like, listen, you made the decision not to go to college. You made the decision at 17 years old to come to the NBA. Well, this is a man's league, and we are going to treat you like an adult. Like, that's it. We're treating you like an adult. You made this decision. Here you are. So I think both Dale Harris and Phil Jackson were very wise in sort of their impulse not to baby him. Because if you babied him, number one, it would have slowed down his development. And number two, it would have made players really resent him and think, why does this guy get special treatment when we don't? So I always thought the Lakers' handling of Kobe Bryant if Kobe Bryant was almost drafted by the New Jersey Nets, and he would have been playing on a dysfunctional team with John Calipari as his coach, and it would have been a freaking disaster because Calipari would have babied him. He would have entered the league, probably started for the Nets from day one. He would have shot 30 times. All the other players would have hated him. And he probably, to be honest, would have had kind of a journeyman career. He would have played with the Nets, found free agent, gone somewhere else. He just landed in the right place at the right time with the right staff.
Jeff, you just mentioned an alternative timeline. I kind of want to ask about a different alternative timeline potential. In the book, you go over a story about a scuffle with Chris Childs
Mm-hmm.
and kind of how impactful that was. Do you feel like things would have turned out differently if that hadn't happened? Like, what would have happened to the Lakers overall? Could it be that that scuffle was actually a positive impact on Kobe and the Lakers to actually have that happen?
Well, I mean, it was positive in that a teammate stood up for him, and there was a sense of, it's kind of like how you stand up for a sibling you don't really like. Like if your brother or sister is getting his ass kicked in a fight, you're still going to stand up for them because they're your brother or sister. And sort of like, I may hate you, but we're still family. We still have a kinship. And that was really the first example of the Lakers having Kobe's back in a public setting. I don't know if it changed the course of history or changed the course of the franchise, but I think it was very important for Kobe Bryant to see that, that it did, despite all the sort of animosity toward him, despite the ridicule of him, despite the ways he didn't fit in, which were many, he still was a Laker and he was still part of that sort of family bond. So I don't know if it changed anything, but I think it was an important little moment.
Phil Jackson referred to Kobe as a juvenile, and that just stands out to me a little bit. I'm thinking about Phil Jackson, and Phil Jackson, of course, was coming off of coaching the Bulls, and now we have an idea of what was going on in that. I mean, you being a sports reporter, you know, most likely knew that all was not rosy in the Bulls locker room, but now the public has a better idea of just like what it was like when you look at Kobe and how and the research on Kobe and just how he was his first few years with his teammates. But it was different. While MJ was the number one player on his team, on this team it was definitely Shaq. Like Shaq was the lead of this team, and Kobe wanted that spot, but Shaq was the most dominant player in the league. He was the true number one. So when you look at like to me, like you said, Phil was like really the perfect coach for this group. When you look at his history with the Bulls, like was that also your when you think about Phil Jackson coaching this group, especially with his history with MJ, and then managing this Kobe, the mini MJ. What was your like your takeaway from the antics of Kobe when you think about what MJ was doing with his teammates in practice and on the bus and everywhere else?
Well, I think it was totally different in a lot of ways. The thing is, when Jordan arrived in Chicago, the Bulls were a train wreck. Like they were an absolute train wreck. There were a lot of drugs, a lot of cocaine users. There was a team of undisciplined players, Quentin Daly, Orlando Warridge, that type of guy. They were a mess. And when Kobe arrived in Los Angeles, he arrived on a team with a lot of talent and a new Shaquille O'Neal in the middle of it all. Um, it's weird when people compare the two because Jordan was an original and Kobe wanted to be Jordan, and he desperately wanted to be Jordan. I mean, he mimicked Jordan in every way. If you watch young Kobe and see how he speaks, the cadence, the tongue out, the mannerisms, the shrug, the moves, everything. People say like when he was young, he would watch Magic and Bird, but I mean, he imitated Jordan completely. And the difference is like Jordan, when Phil Jackson took over for Doug Collins, and Phil Jackson said, I have this new system. We're going to run this Tex Winner system. It's called the Triangle. You're going to get fewer shots, but we're going to win more games. And Jordan bought in immediately. And when Kobe arrived in LA, all he wanted to do was play. And when he was in the game, all he wanted to do was shoot. And if you watch a young Kobe, it's a lot of dribble, 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 dribble. If you watch when he shot the 3 air balls in Utah, if you go on YouTube and watch it, guys are wide open. Guys are wide open. Eddie Jones is wide open. Nick Van Exel is wide open. But he just, from the beginning, thought he was the man. And ultimately, it did him very well. Like, ultimately, carrying that belief made him the great player he was. But as a young player without the NBA sort of experience yet, he was kind of a disaster. And again, like I was asked early on here, like, was there a lot of backlash toward this book? And no, there really wasn't. And in hindsight, I think the number one reason is because people who accurately remember the Lakers remember that Kobe was a pain in the ass as a young guy. And in a way, that's not an indictment of him because he grew into something really special. But he was not easy. And Jordan came along and accepted everything that he was being told. And Kobe Bryant really didn't early on.
Go ahead, Ryan. You came off mute.
Yeah, all right. I actually want to ask a question about Shaq. Mike Penberthy said about Shaq, and I love this quote: "There's good people, there's great people, and there's Shaq," and I just love that. And you hilariously described him, or in the book, as Mark Madson's MormonMatch.com, and I was laughing hysterically at that forever.
Yeah.
In your LA Times interview about the book, you mentioned that in the Turner Studios, in the middle of the interview, he got a call, and like you overheard him hearing something about a funeral, and he
Yeah.
immediately agreed to pay for the funeral. So, like overall, he just seems like this amazing guy. However, contrasting that, you've also got pieces and stories that we've heard of him just decking a couple people and coming to blows with people, including Kobe. So I'd like to know, with all the stories you've heard firsthand, and you've relayed them beautifully in this book and actually in other ways as well, how do you feel about Shaq as a person? Because he seems like this wonderful, jolly person that just is the most giving superstar ever. But at the same time, he's clearly got a side to him that you don't want to anger him, because I mean he's willing to hit people if you get on his bad side. And then also at the same time, how do you feel about the Kobe and Shaq relationship and the way Shaq treated Kobe, now that you've been up and close and personal with these people?
All right. So here's a true story. Last night I had a big. I recently took down. My son and I had a basketball hoop that we played on for years, and I recently took it down, and I couldn't figure out what to do with the backboard because the backboard's too big for the trash. So last night at like 1 in the morning, I took the backboard, drove to my local movie theater, and put it in their dumpster. Right, that is a dick thing to do, but I didn't know what to do with it. And I think most people who know me would say, oh, he's a really nice guy. Like he helped me with writing or he talked to me. But I'm still the guy who took his backboard and put it in the movie theater dumpster when you're not supposed to do it. Like we all have different sides to us. Like we're all people are like, ah, oh, he's such a great guy. And I'm like, yeah, he's a great guy, but no one's always a great guy. We all have our moments where we're assholes and we're jerks and we treat people poorly. I think Shaq is the best teammate in the history of the best superstar teammate in the history of pro sports. I really do. I don't even know who'd be a close second. He was embracing, he was endearing, he took you under his wing. Um, he was lovable. He would buy, again, like he bought everyone's stuff. He was just buying people's stuff left and right. If you were Mike Penberthy's a great example. I mean, he saw how Mike Penberthy dressed in his rookie year. Mike Penberthy at guard out of Masters College, and he immediately took him to his own tailor and bought him suits. Like that was Shaq, and there's a million stories like that. The one thing Shaq wanted was to be appreciated. Like he wanted to be loved and he wanted to be appreciated. And he desperately, desperately, desperately wanted to have a Batman and Robin thing with Kobe. Like he really wanted that. He wanted to be big brother, little brother. And he would always say, my little brother and blah, blah, blah. But Kobe didn't think of himself as a little brother. Kobe didn't want a big brother. Kobe had sisters. Like he was fine with who he was. And I think in a way that was really damaging to the relationship. So, Shaq could be pouty and he could be moody. And he really was a guy who just wanted to be loved and appreciated. I think ultimately when you talk to guys on that team, I mean, he's as beloved a teammate as you'll ever find.
Did you want to follow up that, Ryan?
Yeah, just one final thing, because I'm unfortunately going to have to go shortly. Do you think that Bill Plaschke's quote, and actually I think it might have been the headline to his article when Kobe retired, which was Kobe didn't play to win hearts, he just played to win. Do you think that came into play with their relationship and maybe not allowing Shaq to get that relationship with Kobe?
He just didn't give a shit. Like Kobe did not give a shit whether you liked him or not. It's an amazing talent to have as a professional athlete. It actually really is. I mean, Jordan didn't either. Jordan didn't really care if his teammates liked him. He just wanted to win and he wanted to kill you. And Kobe was the exact same way. So I I think that headline is absolutely perfect. Like, he just wanted to dominate you no matter what. And that's it. And that's what drove him. Like, Shaq was driven. He wanted to win, but he also wanted to be loved and he wanted to be embraced. And Kobe ultimately, I think he wanted those things, but I think his number one drive was just to beat the crap out of you.
So do you think Shaq wanted to win more, or do you think he wanted to be liked more?
I think both. I mean, it's hard to, I don't have an exact measure, but I mean, this is what I say about Shaq. If you told me I could have one guy's career, Shaq or Kobe, I take Shaq every single moment because I think Shaq really enjoyed it. And I always thought, I've talked about this with other writers, like Shaq was in on the joke of it all. This is what I always say. Shaq understood innately that this was all kind of a joke. Like, he was getting paid millions of dollars to put a round ball through a cylinder and wear, glorified pajamas, purple and gold pajamas. And he was always kind of in on the joke of it all. And he was always doing it with a laugh and a smile and a shrug and a nod. He's a guy rapping with Foo Snickens. He's a guy doing a million commercials. He just got it. And Kobe wasn't really in it. To Kobe, it wasn't a joke at all. It was kill or be killed. So I think Shaq probably enjoyed his career a million times more. But I think Kobe goes down as the better player.
That's fair. All right, thank you.
Yep.
Thank you, Jeff. And just let me know when you are ready to wrap up.
Okay.
What I was curious about, when you look at Shaq, and one of the things that Kobe complained about with Shaq is that he will show up to camp not ready to go. Like, he wouldn't be, you know, in shape or, look like he was really, really committed to starting the season the way that Kobe wanted to. And on Kobe's side, he felt like that was. I'm sorry. You wanted to say something, Jeff?
Nope, I'm listening.
He felt like, on Kobe's side, he felt like that was, like damaging on his side. You weren't giving your all. And to him, he just felt like, like with you being, if we really want to win this thing and keep, being dominant, it'd be good if he actually came in and tried instead of coming in, not really trying. When you look at that side of things, and then you look at how the story ended between Shaq and Kobe in 2004, I call it the great divorce. When you think about those things between the dynamics between Kobe overworking or working very hard and Shaq, you know, in his eyes maybe at the time was working smarter because at the getting of the season, like, he can get in there in the flow of the season. I was curious of your thoughts on both of their approaches to things like that and and talk about really divorce.
I mean, Kobe had a very fair point. I mean, there was one offseason where Shaq had a toe injury. I think it was a toe injury, and he wouldn't get it. He wouldn't get it fixed until training camp because he said he's going to do it on company time, and that was absolutely infuriating to Kobe Bryant, like just infuriating. And Coach Shaq didn't work that hard. Like, he was naturally big, naturally gifted. It's not they didn't work, but I mean, he wasn't in the gym like Kobe, hoisting 1,000 shots a day and sweating his ass off during the off season. And I mean, the classic Kobe is, again, as a young buck, he airballs a bunch of 3-pointers against Utah in the playoffs, and for a lot of young players, that would have been a killer. It would have taken a ton to come back from that. I mean, think of Nick Anderson with Orlando missing the free throws. He never recovered from that, and a lot of guys never do. But Kobe was in the gym the next freaking day, shooting 3-pointers, saying that's never going to happen to me again. That's never effing going to happen to me again. And Shaq was in the pool eating cheeseburgers. That was Shaq. I'm gonna enjoy this life. I'm gonna live this as large as I can for as long as I can. And again, I think Shaq enjoyed his career more. But if I'm Kobe Bryant and I see this, I'm pissed off too, because I'm putting everything I can into this, and this guy's half-assing it. So he had a very fair point. It wasn't who Shaq was.
Go ahead, Evan.
My question is kind of, I always found Kobe to be interesting, especially he's one of the players I was able to see the entire thing, right? Day one to the end. It's hard to do that, especially as you're growing up, because you're coming in the middle of a story. For Kobe, I was there from day one until the absolute end of the career and, unfortunately, the life. One thing I always found interesting about him, which you do go in depth about it in the book, is the fact that he's kind of always out of place, right? He's really really young for an NBA player and coming up, in the league as a young teenager essentially, and he's also out of place kind of in America, right? Because he was overseas and then he comes here, he comes to suburban Philadelphia. He's got all this basketball heritage from his father, and he's trying to fit in. And you talked a lot about that slam cover and how he's kind of almost trying to portray like, oh, I'm like this urban, guy who's grown up in America this whole time. I got a rap album and I'm kind of tough. And his teammates never really bought it. And you talked about how they didn't buy like some of his tough guy antics. Can you kind of discuss a little bit about Kobe's, kind of coming of age in America as a star athlete here, and kind of how that's different from, other players, who are from overseas like Giannis and things of that nature?
So it's funny. The other day I was watching the VMAs on MTV with my kids, the Video Music Awards. And, they show Taylor Swift and they show whatever, the K-pop boy bands and, all these famous people. And I said to my kids, I was like, the funny thing is all these people who we all consider cool, like the cool kids, were actually the nerds in high school, like the drama kids, the band kids, the writers like me, like we're all the nerds in high school. And then later, hopefully we end up doing things and people are like, oh, not really right. Right. No one thinks a writer is cool, but like people look at Taylor Swift and she's probably in high school. She was just this nerdy girl who wanted to sing. And it's funny how the perception flips. And Kobe Bryant, like he really was raised in a bubble. He was raised in Italy. He was one of the few black kids, I think the only black kid in his school. He spoke fluent Italian. He dressed a certain way. He dressed like an Italian kid. He spoke like an Italian kid. He walked like an Italian kid. His enunciation was that of an Italian kid. And he really wasn't raised like a lot of NBA players are raised. If you want to go a little cliche, a lot of these guys are African American guys who were raised in pretty tough backgrounds, who grew up, especially in that era, playing basketball on the street or playing basketball on the Y, playing basketball at the Boys and Girls Club, and developing a toughness that comes along with that experience. And Kobe, he glided along, like he was a kid who glided. He wasn't rough. He wasn't, and even when he went to Lower Merion, which is a leafy suburb of Philadelphia. He wasn't from Philly. He was from Lower Merion, if you want to talk America upbringing. So again, he's raised in a largely suburban environment with mostly white kids who are never going to, who are like sons of doctors, sons of lawyers, wealthy upbringing. And so he didn't share sort of a commonality with a lot of NBA players. And it really exposed him in the locker room. He just wasn't like the other guys. He just wasn't. And what bridges that gap is when you become really good and you're a dominant force and people see you and they're like, whoa, this guy can really play. That's what changes perceptions. But he really struggled, like really struggled. I mean, when he got married to Vanessa, he didn't invite, not only did he not invite any of his teammates didn't even know he was getting married. Like, that's crazy in the tiny NBA locker room world. I can't think of another NBA player who's getting married and none of his teammates knew he was getting married. But that was Kobe. So it took a long time for him to sort of overcome the cultural gaps.
Yeah, that reminds me of one scenario you said where Karl Malone had to tell his teammates, have a good, I think it was Thanksgiving break or Christmas
Thanksgiving.
break. Yes,
Yeah.
because he didn't kind of understand the culture norms. Like, hey, you're the leader. It would do a lot if you would just extend that olive branch. And he went around telling everyone to have a good Thanksgiving. It's just kind of funny to think that a vet would have to tell a leader that because it's a good social norm to do.
He just wasn't cool. Like, Kobe wasn't cool. He looked cool. He's a good-looking guy. He had a really cool haircut back in the day before he shaved it off. Whatever. He was physically fit and he was a Laker, but he wasn't cool. He was super. Like, Shaq was insanely cool. Shaq is just a cool guy. He's still a cool guy. He still is a personification of cool. Kobe was kind of a geek who played basketball and looked the part, but he wasn't really comfortable with other people and he didn't really know how to engage. And Karl Malone did have to say to him, listen, it was basically they were leaving for Thanksgiving and he sees Kobe sort of, this is the 04 season, and he sees Kobe sort of, about to leave, and he calls him over and says, he whispers something to him. And he basically says, before you leave, you got to wish teammates a happy Thanksgiving. And he watches Kobe go man to man. Hey, man, have a good Thanksgiving. He just didn't know to do it. It wasn't in his makeup.
Hey, Jeff, I have a question for you. You've written about basketball across multiple decades. I mean, we've all, I mean, at least I know the hosts on stage, we've been watching, HBO and everything that's based on your book, and then this. And so we know you've been exposed to basketball players from late 70s, early 80s, late 80s, 90s, et cetera, et cetera. Can you talk a little bit about the difference between the players and how they talk and how they act from the different eras? Because to me, that's something fascinating, that they act different, they speak differently, they treat each other differently. What have you noticed about the players from the different eras? And is there a line between different eras that maybe players, after a certain time act differently, or are they all kind of the same and it just looks different from the outside? But you've entered a world that most of us haven't entered by being able to speak to people directly. Can you talk a little bit about that from the inside?
Yeah, well, I think that's a very interesting question. I think the modern NBA is really awful to cover, like really, really awful to cover because publicists. So basically, when I've covered the NBA and the two eras I've written about, the people in charge of access to players were the public relations officials with the teams. So if you wanted to do an interview with Magic Johnson or you wanted to do an interview with Shaq or Kobe, you would go through John Black, who was a publicist with the Lakers, and he would hook you up. And nowadays, the main people who control players are their agents and the agencies. And they are very keenly aware that the media, they don't really need the media anymore. Like social media has made the media much more obsolete when it comes to the NBA. So you can't just walk into the Lakers locker room nowadays and say, "Hey LeBron, I'd love to talk to you for 50 minutes. Can we get dinner after?" Or, "Hey LeBron, do you think you can make time for me later today?" Like it's almost impossible. And it's become very, very difficult. Um, I think early on, like so I wrote obviously Showtime about the Magic era, 79 to 91. The players were so happy to be covered that it was really easy. Like this was when, when Magic came into the league, the NBA finals was still being showed on tape delay in some parts of the country. So if you wanted to do a piece on Magic or even Bird or McHale or Dr. J or whoever, like you were going to get time with them. Even if you were from, you know, whatever, the Orange County Register. Like you didn't have to be from the New York Times. Like you would get time with them. And during the Shaq era, this is right before social media. This is when NBA players really, really, really started to blow up in major ways. And it was also a really good time to cover these players because they were becoming mega stars. In fact, they were mega stars. So if Magic Johnson ushered in the era of the big star and made it sort of happen, the NBA player is a huge, enormous star. Shaq, Kobe, Iverson, Garnett, that era of players completely and totally capitalized on it and became sort of, they wouldn't just be on the cover of SI, they'd be on the cover of Rolling Stone. They'd be hosting Yo MTV Raps as a guest. They, name it across the board. So that too was a great era to cover the NBA, and players were really into it. And I just think nowadays, with the dismantling of traditional media, with the blossoming of social media, players are much, 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 much harder to cover.
Thank you. Awesome.
Thank you. Jeff, when we look at the divorce of Shaq, Kobe, and Phil Jackson, there were a few things. Like, number one, of course, Kobe not wanting to be a sidekick anymore. He didn't want to play with Shaq anymore.
Mm.
And then you have Phil Jackson. You have Shaq finding out that he was being traded from, by looking at a program on TV and being pissed off with him not being communicated with the way he felt he should for his stature.
Yeah.
And then you had Jeannie telling Phil that they will not be bringing him back to coach. And Phil having a conversation with Kobe about he wanted to feel needed by Kobe, like asking Kobe about how he felt about him, returning to coach or, and Kobe was just like, you need to make your decision and basically tell you need to make your decision of what's best for you and don't think about, that really is your decision. Like he didn't make it sound like he was needed.
Uh-huh.
When you think about that, it was like Kobe wanted to take the reins of the team. He just wanted, he wanted to be his team. But the way that the divorce happened, looking at it now from your lens, was there any savoring this relationship? Like, was there the way it ended just seemed so like everybody went their separate ways, you know what I mean, like forcefully, but it just was a to me it was just such a nasty breakup.
I mean, it was. I mean, I know this is people don't like hearing this. It was totally Kobe's doing. Like Kobe thought it was his time, his team. He wanted to take over. He wanted to be the man, and he really sort of he made it clear he did. He basically made the Lakers pick Shaq or him, and he was a young. I mean, he was going through the Eagle, Colorado sort of rape trial situation, which made him a little bit of damaged goods. But ultimately, he told them it's either him or me. And he also kind of made it clear he didn't want to play for Phil anymore. So, I mean, people don't like hearing it. It's not the joyful story, especially with his passing. But the reason that thing ended is because Kobe didn't want to play with him anymore. He said, I mean, there's a scene in the book that, is true where they lost to the Pistons in the NBA Finals in '04. And, Karl Malone was hurt. They might have competed. They were outclassed in that series. The Pistons were just a better team. They played together. Lakers had kind of run their course. But Kareem Rush, one of the young players on the Lakers, told me the story of like he's feeling good about this. He's like, well, we made the finals and Carl got hurt and we're all going to come back. And Kobe basically said, if he's coming back, I'm not coming back. And the other thing you have to remember is the Clippers are hot and heavy over Kobe, and he was seriously considered going to the Clippers. And the Lakers really, if the Lakers had brought Shaq back, Kobe was going to sign with the Clippers as a free agent. And if Kobe signs with the Clippers as a free agent, I mean, it's just an unbearable situation for the Buss family. Like you cannot have Kobe Bryant joining the team that plays in the same building. You just can't have it. He's a homegrown talent. He's in his early 20s. You can't do it. So that was kind of the end of it all.
Yeah, I mean, there's no doubt about that, and I thought it was interesting in this in the chapter. You have the end. You talked about how Karan Butler called Kobe, and basically connecting with a new teammate.
Yep.
Kobe's like, "How'd you get my number?" And then he changes his number. Like so, like this is this is the Kobe we're talking about at this time, not the one that like all the players love that he was reaching out to and holding workouts with players, and he was looked like he was reachable, and he was when he retired, as he got older, and especially after retired, he was more mature, and he had different relationships with players at the time, but we're talking about a very young Kobe. Came into the league 17 years old, and yeah, 2004. That's only 8 years later. So he's like 25, still a young
Yep.
man.
I just
Still a very young man.
this is what I always say about Kobe, or I think about Kobe, is like he was a pain. He was difficult. He was ornery. He wasn't very friendly to teammates. He wasn't that relatable, right? And if you talk about any of us at that age, we all think when you don't have worldliness and you're just young. I mean, he obviously lived in Italy, so he had some worldliness. But like when you're young and you're cocky and you think you're the shit and you feel great about yourself, like you can really be an asshole. And I'm not just talking about Kobe. I'm talking about me as a young writer, or a million different people who think, we all show up at a job out of college or out of wherever, and we think we're hot shit. We do because we're young and the wind's at our back and we don't know any better. And then throw into he had to do it in the public light, and he had to do it in a really sort of unique environment, which is the NBA. Like, so it's not an insult to him. I've never thought of it. It was an insult to Kobe Bryant to say at age 22, he was a pain in the ass. At age 23, he was a pain in the ass. You could not really work with him. He was really difficult because ultimately it's what made him who he was. And I live in Southern California. I'm not from here, but I live here. And when he died, it was like the Pope dying, or it was like the Prime Minister dying. It was out here. It was just insane, the levels of love and appreciation. And I really think a lot of that is because people know the journey he went on, that he started out one way and he ended another way. And he came to symbolize hard work, doggedness, dedication, putting your mind to something, setting your mind to something, accomplishing a goal. He really became that. And I don't think he becomes that if he doesn't start out as a young pain in the ass. You know, you need to go through your stages and your challenges to get where you want to go.
Thank you so much, Edwin, Ryan. Do you guys have an additional question you'd like to ask? I was going to um, move us towards Jeff mentioning his new book he has coming out in a few weeks or very soon that I will be buying because I'm now obsessed with his books on people that I like. He has a book coming out on Bo Jackson very soon. But anything you guys want to add here about as we close out, any other final questions?
Yeah, briefly, one last thing, and forgive me, I'm trying to do two things at the same time here. But uh, Jeff, you mentioned that Kobe Bryant was kind of two different people, one before his rape trial, one kind of after that, sometime 2005 to his death. In February of 2018, Shaq and Kobe, had their special where they sat down together and sort of made up. And Shaq famously sat courtside at Kobe's last game. And O'Neal was present at Kobe's Hall of Fame induction ceremony. And so clearly their relationship changed significantly as they grew older. And so I'm curious, as you researched this book, as you interviewed all of these people, did it surprise you after knowing how their relationship was in their playing days to see them reconcile the way they did? Or was that not a surprise that as they aged and became mature, maybe specifically Kobe, that they were able to come together the way they did?
So I know people love happy endings, but I got to say, like, they were never that close. Like, even after the retirement, they weren't really that close. Like, they hadn't really talked very much in the years since, and they sort of made peace with each other, but they weren't friends. Like, I think Shaq would admit that they weren't friends. Like, they were just former colleagues who worked together and appreciated each other. And I think the grief you saw when Kobe died from Shaq is the grief of someone who knew he shared a really special partnership with someone, and that half of that has left. Like, I don't think it was about I just lost my best friend. I think there's this piece of nostalgia that really bleeds deep in me and that means a ton to me, and a big part of that is gone. And yeah, I didn't talk to him all the time and we weren't buddies, but that guy was my sidekick for many years, and now he doesn't exist, and it's really jarring and it's really sad. But I can't, like, the narrative that like they became buddies just isn't really true. Like, they were cool with each other, like they made peace just because that's what time is, and as you get older. But they weren't having picnics with each other.
I Yeah, I don't think from the outside well, I know I didn't really think they were, having picnics or buddy buddy.
Yeah.
But and I know that you couldn't get Kobe's specific point of view, and I wish you could have, and I understand why you couldn't.
Yeah.
But it seems like you get Shaq's point of view, but even though
Mhm.
you couldn't get Kobe's point of view on it, do you feel like Kobe had a different feeling about Shaq, or do you think he was kind of the same old Kobe, and it was Shaq who changed his stance on Kobe, or do you think there may have been a softening from both, or was it just same old Kobe?
No, definitely from both. I mean, Kobe was retired, and I'm telling very few rivalries in sports last once you retire. Very few, like Favre and Rodgers are totally fine with each other. They're not going out for picnics and they're not going out for beers, but they're all good with each other. Like if you got Roger Clemens and Mike Piazza together, they'd be fine. Like, it's funny. Sean Green, the former Dodger, said to me not that long ago. We had lunch, and he's like, "We're all nicer once we retire." You know, and that actually stuck with me because it's actually true. Athletes are not. Barry Bonds was the worst guy I ever covered. By all accounts, he's a really nice guy now to deal with. Like, people just time heals all wounds. So I just think they were all past it. It was all about nostalgia and just remembering old times. So I don't think there was any lingering bitterness.
Thanks very much. Appreciate
Yep.
everything you've done
Sure.
today. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Thank you so much for being here, Jeff, and really appreciate your insight that you gave. I absolutely love your work. As you know, I read the Walter Payton book, which I absolutely loved. It was my favorite book on a football player that I read. Next would be the book on Favre, Gunslinger. But I know you have a book coming out very soon on Bo Jackson.
Correct.
Is there any you want to share any details or any information about that book with folks that are here or that will listen after?
Well, yeah. I mean, it's called The Last Folk Hero. It comes out October 25th, but you can pre-order it now. It's the most people I've ever interviewed for a book. I interviewed 720 people. I dove deep, deep, deep into Bo. He's a fascinating story. Bessemer, Alabama, one of 10 kids, raised by a single mom. I think the best athlete who's ever lived. And, there's no way to prove that. But I mean, the guy, this is what I always say about Bo Jackson. If you want to know Bo Jackson in high school at McAdory High School in Bessemer, Alabama. In his baseball career, he stole 90 out of 91 bases. His senior year, he won the state decathlon one day. The very next day, his baseball team needed him to pitch an elimination game. He hadn't pitched all year. He threw a complete game and struck out 13. And this is the day after he won the decathlon on a bad ankle. Like, the guy's just the most ridiculous, preposterous athlete ever. He ran a 4.1340 at 230 pounds. And everything you've heard about him, you can magnify times a million. It's just ridiculous. So I'm very excited for the book to come out.
I'm very excited to read that one. I will be getting that when the day it comes out.
Thank you.
So I appreciate your work. I appreciate you being here to speak with us and for even allowing us to push the time up a bit and or back a bit, whatever one is the right way.
Yep.
And thanks everyone for coming through and listening to Jeff as we talked about Kobe, Shaq, and the Three Ring Circus. I mean, I can't imagine. I mean, I did want to end with this. As we look at now, we're in the LeBron era of the Lakers, and they did win a chip.
Yeah.
Will you consider, like, say, after LeBron finally retires, to do because who knows, he's going to play 24 or 25 seasons, I guess. Would you consider doing a book on just on LeBron's era of the Lakers?
I just don't find I don't find this time in Laker history particularly, I don't think people feel that romantic about it. Like, there's a romanticism to Shaq and Kobe, and there's definitely a romanticism to Magic and Kareem. And it's definitely too early to tell, obviously. Nostalgia doesn't happen overnight. But if they just win that one title in the bubble season with no fans in attendance, I don't know. I find it a little stale to witness in person. First of all, I don't consider LeBron a Laker. I mean, at the end of the day, I think he's a Cleveland guy. I think that's cool. He's a Cav. So I don't know who's buying that book. Maybe I'll change my mind later on, but I don't know. I don't know who's buying that book.
I have to agree with you right there.
Oh, okay. I
Yeah.
mean, I'm personally, the funny thing is, I've had a lot of Lakers content, but I'm a Nets fan. But I'm
Me
just
too. Grew up a
fascinated
Nets fan.
by.
Yeah.
Oh wow.
I grew
Okay.
up a New Jersey Nets fan, though.
I'm a New Jersey Nets fan too because I lived out in New Jersey my whole life. So I
Yeah.
am a New Jersey Nets fan.
Yeah.
And I still follow and support and will be writing and all that about supporting the Nets this season. But I just love Lakers history from Magic, from Kareem to Magic to the three-peat era. I love basketball history in general as a hoops historian. So
Wait, can I make one point about the Nets that I bet you'll agree with?
Okay, let's hear it.
Okay. I thought the Nets, when they had when they were right before they got Kyrie and right before they got Kevin Durant, and they had D'Angelo Russell, excuse me. I just thought they were really fun. And it's really fun when your team is coming on. Like, I remember being in New York and the Knicks, right before they traded for Carmelo. They had Wilson Chandler and Danilo Gallinari and Ray Felton. And they were this fast moving, high flying number 5 seed. And they were really fun. And as a Knicks fan, you probably felt like this is a fun team on the rise. And the Nets, all of a sudden, they were pretty good. They were an 8 seed. Russell was a revelation. And I just don't think they're fun. It's hard to root for a team where they just buy up all the best players and they're always seem kind of grumpy. And you have Kyrie who won't get the vaccine, and you have Durant who's just always kind of frowning and scowling. I think it's more fun to root for teams sometimes on the way up than it is when they actually get there and they buy all these parts. I just don't find these Nets very likable.
Yeah, I hear you. Like as a longtime Nets fan, originally when the trades and some of the decisions were made, I mean, I'm a KD fan. I've been a KD fan since he was drafted, and I was excited when he joined like my team that like KD like on my team, and like Kyrie and him are really close. And I'm a fan of how Kyrie plays the game,
Sure.
but yeah, the tone changed with the Nets when they got here. But as a longtime fan, I need a chip. Like this season, all the cards are on the table. Let's get the chip. Yeah, the old team, I still follow some of those guys. Like I still watch their games. My afro out in Cleveland. I sometimes watch D'Angelo Russell's games, Karis LeVert. Like that was a fun team. I did love that team. I still go back to Jason Kidd's team.
Oh,
I
wait.
mean, that
I
was
loved. Wait, I'm being serious. Like to me, that's the exact thing I'm trying to say. Like, all right, they get Jason Kidd in a trade from Phoenix. They draft Keith Van Horn. They draft Kenyon Martin. They draft Richard Jefferson. They draft Jason Collins. Like they cobble together this team, and you're along for the ride. You're like, oh, they're drafting this guy Van Horn, number 2. All right, he looks like he's going to be good. Oh, they got the number 1 pick because they were terrible. They're going to draft Kenyon Martin. Okay, and you're along for the ride of building a team. And I just think, yeah, they didn't win in the NBA championship, but they went there twice to the time, and it was really fun. And I just think there was a lot more joy in those teams and the construction of that team than there is now. It just doesn't feel as joyful.
I hear you. I
Yeah.
want, like it'll be worth it if we get a chip, and
All
then we
right.
can,
I
and
don't think you
then
are, though. I don't think you are.
Jeff, you
Sorry.
said you are a Nets fan.
I was a Nets fan. When
I
you
agree with
start
Jeff on
covering
that.
it, you
I
lose
agree.
your fandom. I don't think you are.
Oh, right, you're not a fan. You're not a
Yeah.
fan now.
No,
Okay, I
I
get
don't
it
care.
because
Yeah.
you cover because you're a sports. Yep, I get it. I get it.
You just
I
root for good
respect.
stories. Yeah.
I respect your opinion. I respect it, and thank you for your insight.
Yeah.
But
Thanks for having me on.
I'm praying for a ring. We didn't leave time for questions, and I'm sorry for people that are requesting to speak. Um, I kept Jeff for like a little over an hour now. So,
Hey, Malika, can I ask Edwin a question really quick? Hey, Edwin, like me, do you feel a little bit personally attacked as a Laker fan when Jeff says that he doesn't like teams that, don't naturally grow and they just sort of, sign free agents and that sort of thing? Because when they're talking about the Nets doing it this way, it kind of feels like that's an attack at the Lakers team that we're all kind of talking about in a way. What do you think?
Yeah, I was muted for a reason. So yeah, that did feel like a few shots here, but different ways to build winning organizations, and you see the negatives of teams that are always basketball Twitter's favorite darlings that never win anything, but you also see the opposite where you sell the farm for a golden egg and then it doesn't hatch. So I think either way, in basket in any sport, it's extremely difficult. There's only one winner every year, and it's very hard. And we've seen ways to do it and not do it. And I think we've seen both work and not work. So it kind of all depends on your perspective, and obviously as a fan, preference. Some people like the Clippers before Kawhi and Paul George because they were the rough, and tough team that fought for a second round and lost versus having 2 superstars that they just traded everyone for. So it's different ways people like to fan and like to see things go.
Well said.
All
I
right,
got to
thank
go,
you again,
guys.
Jeff.
Don't get mad at me. Got to leave.
yeah, I appreciate the time, Jeff. Again, thank you.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
And I appreciate your time. Looking forward to reading the Bo Jackson book. And football season's coming, so
There you
I'll
go.
be in your inbox about something.
Nice.
Yay!
All right, thanks
Thanks
for having
again,
me
Jeff.
on. I appreciate it.
Have a good one.
All right.
Have a great evening, everyone. Thanks for stopping through.